back to discuss the safe sanctuary policy for the Texas Annual Conference. And I am a sexual assault survivor from a United Methodist minister that was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. He was my father, John Chester Dowden, who passed away in 2012, and my mother passed away in 2018. In 2017, before my mother passed away, I obtained a recorded conversation of my mother, Grace Dowden, admitting to drugging me with codeine and narcotics so that my father could sexually assault me when I was a little girl. My father was employed as a United Methodist minister during that time, and during that time that they engaged in that inappropriate act, my father was employed under the Northwest Texas Annual Conference. The United Methodist denomination has gone through major changes since that time, and I will cover a little bit of that later on. I also wanted to read some definitions that I am getting from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. It is a website online that I found, and because the Texas Annual Conference seems to think that surviving sexual assault is a sexual orientation or a sexual preference, but it is not. And it can't be, because it has nothing to do with consent. So first I'm going to read some definitions that might help out the staff of the Texas Annual Conference administration. Sexual assault. According to the Office on Violence Against Women, the term sexual assault means any non-consensual sexual act prescribed by federal, tribal, or state law, including when the victim lacks capacity to consent. So, if a large administration called the Texas Annual Conference wants to say that a victim of sexual assault is mentally ill without an official diagnosis, they are out of line because they're not qualified to do that. Also, if they're doing it to discredit that victim, that is not ethical either. State laws vary in the definitions used for sexual assault. Sexual misconduct, terminology typically related to institutions of higher education. One definition is that sexual misconduct is a broad term encompassing any unwelcome behavior of a sexual nature that is committed without consent or by force, intimidation, coercion, or manipulation. A good example of this would be Shane coming on to me at St. Stephen's United Methodist Church during the supervised visitation under the Domestic Relations Office of Harris County. And Shane approaching me to hug me, and I hugged him under duress because I did not feel comfortable saying, "No, stop, I don't want to hug you, go find a crack whore." And so that would be an excellent example of that. Another could be the fact that Shane went and told the Domestic Relations Office that I was going to the media. about their involvement with the Texas Annual Conference and the history of the Texas Annual Conference employing child molesters. And he did this in retaliation because I was not interested in him sexually. I don't know, maybe the crack whore wasn't interested in him either. Also, another good example would be the Texas Annual Conference knowing that a sexual assault survivor of one of their clergy is visiting their children in one of their churches through supervised visitation based on false accusations. And they retaliate because she has spoken out against them. That's another example. Sexual misconduct can be committed by a person or of any gender, and it can occur between people of the same or different gender. Sex act or sexual act, contact between a certain body part and another body part involving other things. However, slight contact between body parts or certain activities of another person or another object. I'm paraphrasing on that one. Consent, freely given agreement to have sexual intercourse or sexual contact as indicated by words or overt actions by a person legally and fundamentally competent. See, what's SARTs should know, SARTs should know about sexual violence, section SART toolkit for additional information related to the cultural and legal significance of consent, which clearly the Texas Annual Conference knows very little about that. Sexual violence is defined as a sexual act that is committed or attempted by another person without freely given consent of the victim or against someone who is unable to consent or refuse, such as, I'm going to go out on a limb here, such as a United Methodist minister whose wife drugs their little girl so that he can sexually assault her because clearly they needed a willing participant, and he later becomes employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. Okay. This is about sexual violence. It includes forced or alcohol drug facilitated assault of a victim. Wow, that sounds very familiar. Forced or alcohol drug facilitated incidents in which the victim was made to do something, a perpetrator or someone else, non-physically pressured, unwanted assault, intentional sexual touching or non-contact acts of sexual nature. Sexual violence can also occur when a perpetrator forces or coerces a victim to engage in sexual acts with a third party. Sexual violence involves a lack of freely given consent, as well as situations in which the victim is unable to consent or refuse. I will give you another example. My mother worked in the child care section at the YMCA in Kingwood. And this was back in the mid 2000s, early mid 2000s. And they were able to go swimming there because she worked there in the child care. So my father thought that it was an opportunity for him to have access to me in the way that he wanted. But by then, I had realized he was a sexual predator. And he would manipulate my mother and tell her that we needed to go swimming as a family. And they were both attending Lake Houston United Methodist Church. And my mother was working in the nursery at Lake Houston United Methodist Church. So my father would persuade my mother and tell her she needed to persuade me to go swimming with them so that I would be in the vulnerable position of being in my bathing suit in a swimming pool. I knew what he was after, what he was trying to do. And I didn't want to believe that my mother would do something so heinous that she would try to persuade me to go swimming with them, knowing that this is what my father, John Dowden, wanted, who was on disability through the Texas Annual Conference Administration and who had also been employed under the Texas Annual Conference Administration as a United Methodist minister. I never went. I was too smart for that. I don't know, maybe in the armchair psychoanalysis mental health diagnosis that I'd had from clergy and my parents, I somehow had some miracle took place, and I had enough of an organized thought process to realize that my father was attempting to perpetrate a sexual encounter with me, or a situation where I would be in my bathing suit, vulnerable. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I don't even want to step foot in the YMCA. I have no desire to get a membership there because of the memory I have of my father wanting me to go swimming with he and my mother so that he could check me out in my bathing suit and use that as an opportunity to violate me in some way. I knew what was going on. And what I noticed is that when I was able to recognize what he was doing and put my foot down, he would up the ante. He would escalate it to see how far he could go, how much he could get away with. Okay. Sexual violence involves a lack of freely given consent, as well as situations in which the victim is unable to consent or refuse. Sexual abuse takes place when a person knowingly causes another person to engage in a sex act by threatening or placing the other person in fear, or if someone engages in a sexual act with a person who is incapable of appraising the nature of the act or unable to give consent. That sounds familiar because I experienced that growing up in the Texas Annual Conference. And you know, my ex-husband, Carly Anthony, he took our sons to visit me at a United Methodist Church that was under the Texas Annual Conference administration, knowing with the full knowledge that the Texas Annual Conference had a history of employing child predators. He knew my dad. He believed me. And yet he took our sons to visit me in that type of environment, knowing that I was sexually assaulted by a United Methodist minister. What does that say about his integrity and his parenting skills, that he's not afraid that he's okay with putting his sons in an environment where their mother is being sexually harassed in front of them? And also knowing that they're being put in an environment where they could potentially be exposed to a sexual predator within a United Methodist Church under an administration that employs or has employed sexual predators, one of them being Kendall Graham and John Chester Dowden. Oh, and not to mention the fact that Carly Anthony allowed my mother to be alone with our sons after he heard the recorded conversation of her admitting to drugging me as a child so that my father could sexually assault me. What does that say about his parenting? The next, okay. Sexual harassment includes unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical harassment of a sexual nature. Like Shane coming on to me, getting in my personal space at the supervised visitation, because clearly, I don't know, I guess it was assumed I was going to be the designated whore of the Texas Annual Conference, because the Texas Annual Conference sees anybody who's been sexually assaulted. It's to them, it's a sexual orientation, because clearly that must be why I was referred to a church that was LGBTQ, right? Now, I have no issue with LGBTQ. I don't care. But if anything, anyone in the LGBTQ community should also take offense that someone who has been sexually assaulted by a clergy, that the only thing that the Texas Annual Conference does is refer that survivor of sexual assault to an LGBTQ community. How are they going to relate to each other? Because it's not the same thing. It's not a sexual preference. Okay, rape. The penetration, no matter how slight sexually, with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. Like Kendall Graham sexually assaulting a minor in his office who was employed as a United Methodist minister under the Texas Annual Conference, and while he sexually assaulted her on the couch, videotaped it while he was employed under the Texas Annual Conference administration. Okay, I'm going to read the safe sanctuary policy. Okay. That's not it. I had it and I lost it. Okay. This is it. I have it here. Okay. And I'm on page 6 of 11. And they're talking about inappropriate behavior and expectations. And this is 7. Those who work with protected persons should avoid conduct that may cross boundaries. The following are some examples of behavior that is considered inappropriate. Any unwanted form of physical affection. Kisses on the mouth. Lengthy hugs or embraces. Any touching of private parts or sexual contact. Displays of affection one-on-one or in isolated areas. Touching knees or legs. Holding children over 3 years of age on the lap. Piggyback rides, wrestling, tickling children or youth. Comments or compliments, verbal, written, or electronic, about bodies or physical attributes. Private meetings with individual children or youth. Giving money or gifts to individual children or youth. Discussing their own sexual activities or inquiring about the sexual activities of others, including children or youth. Possessing, downloading, or viewing viewing sexually oriented or explicit material, or sharing such material with children or youth. Using, possessing, providing, or being under the influence of alcohol or drugs while participating in activities for children or youth. Event supervision. Conference and district events must be supervised and monitored properly to prevent or stop any inappropriate behavior by any adults, youth, children. The following rules will apply to all events, including those off-site. To achieve compliance with the conference safe sanctuary policies, it may be necessary to combine groups, recruit and train additional volunteers, or cancel an event. Well, I know they don't cancel events where these events are held inappropriate and children and women are exploited. Supervision of nursery or child care. There shall be a minimum of 2 unrelated child care providers per room. If they don't follow that, related persons may serve together as long as one other unrelated adult is present at all times. They don't follow that. State child care minimum standards shall be followed particularly in relation to the number of child care providers in child ratio. 0 to 12 months, 2 adults, 8 children max, 1 to 4. 1 to 3-year-olds, 2 adults, 12 children max, 1 to 6. 3 to 5-year-olds, 2 adults, 20 children max, 1 to 10. School age, 2 adults, 24 children max, 1 to 12. Supervision of protected persons. Conference and district events shall observe the 2-leader rule, specifically 2 unrelated leaders per classroom and 2 leaders within line of sight and sound in other areas. Related persons may serve together as long as one other unrelated adult is present at all times. Vulnerable adults may not serve upon special approval from the event leader. May not serve as a qualified adult. Vulnerable adults may not serve as a qualified adult for purposes of this rule. However, a vulnerable adult may be included as a helper upon special approval from the event leader and with training. To eliminate secrecy or isolation, each room used for the care of protected persons should have observation windows or doors with windows. Windows should remain uncovered. If windows are not possible, doors should remain open. Half doors are recommended for use with younger children. Unused rooms should remain locked. Any one-to-one mentoring or consulting should be conducted in sight and sound of one another. I guarantee you that does not happen. One leader may be in contact with multiple youth, 6th through 12th grade, if they are in the line of sight and sound of leaders at all time. Okay, I'm going to look one more thing up. Okay. Well, Google search. Let's see. All right, and here it is. I Googled it. No, rape is not a sexual orientation. It is a violent crime involving forced sexual activity, while sexual orientation refers to a person's enduring pattern of romantic or sexual attraction to men, women, both, or neither. Sexual orientations are typically categorized as heterosexual, bisexual, or asexual. And this is from Google AI Overview. You know, I just wanted to make sure that I could make it easy for the Texas Annual Conference administration to understand.